We're going to cast on with 5 rows of waste yarn. We're going to do 15 rows of a rib and then 100 rows total for the sleeve. The whole thing is going to be done in the round. So here's my waste yarn and I'm going to begin casting on. Now get your main yarn, insert it into the middle, and you're going to do 15 rounds. I've done my 15 rounds and now I'm going to begin doing the rib. And the way I'm going to do this is, once we've passed the white peg, I'm going to take a loom pick, I'm going to pull this completely off the first peg. I also need to have a crochet hook. So I'm going to start picking out these stitches all the way down to the first loop attached to the waste yarn. We're going to insert our hook and then you're just going to work your way back up to create a rib. And then put it back onto the machine. And just give it a little tug to kind of straighten it all out. Now we're going to go back to cranking and we're going to let one stitch pass, and when this third peg starts to rise, but not all the way, we're going to remove that one as well. So this peg is around halfway up. I'm going to remove this stitch from the machine and I'm going to pick these stitches out all the way down to the waste yarn. But just be very careful that you don't lose that last loop. And I'll show you that loop right here. So after that one, this is our last loop. So we're going to insert our crochet hook and we're just going to work our way back up, yarning over those stitches. And we're just going to do this every other stitch all the way around the whole machine. And then put it back onto the machine. And then we're going to crank again. We're going to let one stitch pass, and once this one is halfway up, we're going to remove it from the machine. And we're going to go all the way around every other stitch. Okay, so I've done my rib all the way around and I'm going to be approaching round 17, and now I'm just going to do additional rounds until I reach 100, just in the regular way. Okay, I've done my 100 rounds and now I'm going to cut a tail, release this into the center of the machine. Cast on with some waste yarn and do 5 rows of waste yarn. Cut a tail and release this piece from the machine by going around twice without feeding anything in. Here's the piece removed from the machine, and we're going to stretch this to tighten up our stitches. And there's the sleeve. Now we're going to bind off our stitches. So insert your crochet hook into the first stitch attached to the waste yarn, and then we're going to just slide each stitch into the one before it. So I'm just going into the loop next to it and flipping it onto it. This is a very wide, loose sleeve, so this will not make it difficult to put on and off, and it won't be uncomfortable. Tie a knot. And and you can remove this waist. So there's one end of the sleeve completed, and you can see that it has this really beautiful rib of the 15 rows, and then it kind of just puffs out from there. And now we're going to bind off the stitches at the top, and we're going to do it the same exact way that we did on the cuff. So you're going to find your first stitch attached to the waist yarn, pull up a loop, and you're going to go around closing up these stitches. And just tie a knot. And we can remove this waist yarn as well. And there are both of our sleeves complete. Now we're going to cast on for the back panel. So I'm going to go from pin 1 all the way to 44 in a flat panel. I'm going to begin with 5 rows of waist yarn. Okay, we're up to pin 44. Wrap the yarn around pin 44, put it into the feeder and into the yarn guide, and we're going to go back and forth for 5 rows. Just know that when you're doing panel knitting on the Sentro, there is no counter. So I'm going to use a digital counter right here, and just every time I do a row, I'm going to just tap this. So here we go. This is 1, 2, cut a tail and release this into the middle of the machine. Now get your main color, move the machine until you pass the white pin, insert this into the yarn guide. We're going to do 10 rows of panel knitting so we can do the rib. Now with panel knitting, just make sure that these last and first stitches are completely down. If they're not completely down as you pass them, you're going to end up with dropped or tucked stitches. This guarantees that you have really nice, neat ends on your panel piece. So I'm coming upon this row. Let's see. We just need to make sure that's all the way down, and it's fine if you just push it down with your finger or the loom pick. Okay, I've just done my 10 rows. Now this is technically row 11. So again, every other stitch I'm going to do the rib the same way that I did it on the sleeves. I'm going to skip the first pin, and I'm going to rib the second pin just because I don't want to mess around with that first one, because there's a possibility it could fall off the machine. So I'm just going to pick these out. And I'm going to use my crochet hook to work my way back up. The first one is always going to look kind of loose, but it will tighten up as you go along. And then we're going to just put that back onto the machine and keep going. And we're just going to keep doing that all the way to the end. This is going to be my last rib because I don't want to do a rib on the very last stitch. And that doesn't really matter because when we sew this all together, those last 2 stitches are just going to be in the seam anyway. So we're just going to finish up our purls on this one. Put it back on the machine and complete the row. So that was all row 11. And now we're going to just go back and forth until we get to row 100. We've done our 100 rows. Don't cut your yarn and just place this yarn into the center of the machine. Start moving the machine backwards again. and place your waste yarn in, and we're going to do 5 rows of waste yarn. Release this yarn into the center of the machine and go back and forth twice to release the entire piece from the machine. Here is our back panel released from the machine. Start pulling on the stitches to get everything nice and tight. And go all the way down to the ends and pull on the waste yarn to really tighten up your ribbing. And now we're going to bind off the top part. We didn't cut our yarn because we do need to bind this off very loosely. So insert your hook into the first stitch of the waste yarn and just do a slip stitch all the way across, and just make sure you do it very loosely until you get to the end. Cut a tail and tie this end off, and that's what it should look like. And now you can remove this waste yarn, and there is one side bound off. And then for our bottom row, we are going to reattach the working yarn. Unfortunately, because this is rainbow yarn, it does not match what I had originally, but that's okay. Chain 1, and we're going to very loosely slip stitch to the end. I wish I had thought to do this. When you do the back panel, put a very, very long tail in the middle if you're working with rainbow yarn like this. This will make sure that your bottom is able to match in the same color. I will do that with the front panel. I just really wish I had thought to do that with the back one. Cut a tail and then just tie this off to the original strand of yarn. And there is that end bound off. And now we can remove this waste yarn. And there is the back panel bound off. So you can see we have a nice rib here. This is a little unfortunate with the orange, but I can live with it. And the rest of it looks quite nice. And now we're going to move on to the front panel. And now we're up to the front panel. We're going to do this the same exact way that we did the back panel. We're going to cast on between pins 1 and 44. We're going to do 5 rows of waste yarn, 10 rows of ribbing, and then I will come back to you when I've done those steps. I've completed my row of the rib, so now that counts as row 11, and now I'm going to do 70 rows total before I begin the V-neck. So I'm starting with row 11 to get to row 70. And now we've completed our 70 rows. Don't cut your yarn, but release it from the machine and place it into the center. And now we're going to go once just to release that first set of loops. We're just going to go one time. Now we're going to remove the panel from the machine, but we're going to remove it in 2 halves. We're going to put 22 stitches on one piece of waste yarn and 22 stitches on another piece of waste yarn. So I've cut 2 pieces of waste yarn here, and I'm going to thread the first one right now. And I'm going to begin moving the machine, and I'm going to put 22 stitches onto this piece of waste yarn. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 22. So there's my 22, and I'm just going to tie just a very loose knot like that, just so that they don't fall off. Now I'm going to thread my second piece of waste yarn, and I'm going to put the remaining stitches on this new piece of waste yarn. So there is all of the stitches removed, divided in half. We're going to put these stitches now back on the machine, and we're going to start from the middle towards the outside, because this is the tail that's attached to my working yarn. So it's very easy to put these back on the machine. You can use a loom pick, and you just pick up the one stitch. You want to make sure the wrong side of the work is facing up, and you just slowly crank the machine and put these stitches back on. I'm going to count just so that I know that I didn't drop anything. There should be 22. So this is stitch number 3, 4. I've put my 22 stitches back on the machine. So now I'm going to start turning the handle. I want this to get caught under that first nook and put that back into the yarn guide. I have now 70 rows, and I'm going to do a decrease every other row until I have only 15 stitches on top of the machine. So I'm going to do row 71 just regular. This is 71. And I'm going to do 72 regularly as well. On row 73, I'm going to do a decrease. So I'm going to stop when this first pin is halfway up. And again, you're doing the decreases from the middle, but the ends are going to just be regular flat. So this pin has started to rise. I'm going to take it off the machine, put it onto the pin next to it, and push it all the way down. So that was row 73. 74, I'm going to do flat. 75, I'm going to do flat. 76, I'm going to do flat. And 77, I'm going to do another decrease. So again, we're paying attention to this pin. I want to see that rise up halfway. Remove it from the machine, put it on the pin next to it, and just make sure that it goes all the way down. $78, I'm going to do flat. 79, I'm going to do flat. 80, I'm going to do flat. 81, I'm going to do a decrease. 82, I'm going to do flat. 83, I'm going to do flat. 84, I'm going to do flat. 85, I'm going to do a decrease. And we're just continuing this pattern until we have 15 stitches. So now we have 15. We're going to go across once and then one more time. Cut a really long tail. And insert some waste yarn and do a couple of rows of waste yarn. And there is the first half of the V-neck completed. And now we're going to do the same thing again, where we're going to put the other half of the stitches back onto the machine, and we're going to do the decreases over 30 rows again, so that we only have 15 stitches remaining on the machine, and then cast off with waste yarn. I've completed my decreases on the other side. I'm not going to cut this yarn, so just put it in the middle and attach waste yarn and do 5 rows of waste yarn and release this from the machine. So here's our work off the machine. We're going to stretch it. And you can see we have a really nice V-neck there. And on the side where our ball of yarn is still attached, we're going to bind off these stitches. We're just going to attach our crochet hook and loosely slip stitch across. Remove the waste yarn. And now we'll do the other side. And there are the top 2 shoulder pieces completed. Now we're going to bind off the bottom stitch. So unlike I did on the back panel, on the front panel I put a very long tail so that the yarn matches my cast on. Just as we've been doing this whole time, I'm going to insert my crochet hook and loosely do a slip stitch into each stitch along the bottom. Cut a tail and tie this off. Remove the waste yarn. And there is the front panel completed. And here is the bottom with our rib. It's nice and stretchy. Now we're going to start putting the sweater together. So take your front panel and back panel and put them right sides together. We're going to do slip stitches across the top of each shoulder. So again, take your crochet hook and your working yarn, find the edge of the shoulder. Pull your yarn through, chain one to secure this, and then just slip stitch the two edges together. Take a look at the opposite side just to make sure that it's an even seam, and cut your yarn and tie a knot with both ends. So first we'll secure this knot, and then I'm going to just tie these two ends together for extra security. And I'm going to do the same on the opposite side. And that's what our first seam looks like. And now we're going to do the same on the other side. Now we're going to add our sleeves. So take your sleeve, open this up, and you're going to place the sleeve inside where the correct side of things are located, all the way up to that seam. Close this back down, and I'm just going to use some needles to hold this in place so it doesn't shift while I'm knitting. Just make sure it goes all the way up. And starting at the bottom, we're going to go around the sleeve and down the side seam. So we want to start down here, and we're going to slip stitch all the way around and back down. Okay, I'm getting to the point where I've gone all the way around the whole sleeve, and now I'm going to start working my way down the whole side seam to close it up. Cut your yarn, tie a knot, and there is one seam completed with the sleeve. And now do the same on the other side. And here is the sweater completed. We have our V-neck, we have these really nice ribbed sleeves, and it's quite stretchy, so even though it looks a little small, it will fit quite nicely. You can make these panels bigger if you want. All you have to do is make two and sew them together down the middle. If you liked this project, please give it a shot. If you made this project, please let me know. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.